The Traitor is a 2019 Italian movie starring Pierfrancesco Favino as Tommaso Buscetta, the so-called boss of two worlds, one of the first mafia informants in Sicily during the 1980s. The film covers the events that led him to talking with the government, his trials and that of those who he squealed about, and the aftermath. Now, I didn't know The Traitor was a true story before I watched it, but while you're watching it, you automatically realize that it definitely is based off a true story. It just has that vibe about it, and that works in the film's favour, and yet it does detract from it at the same time. Obviously, knowing a film is true, or at least based off true events, makes it a lot more interesting. It improves the wow factor, and you think to yourself on multiple occasions, whoa, this really happened. But on the other hand, the very reason I could tell this was based off a true story was because of the authoritarian and formulaic feel to the story. It felt like someone was giving a PowerPoint presentation on the history of Buscetta's case at times, with there being a lot of focus on telling us what happened, as opposed to entertaining us. There's an air of expertise about the movie. It is clearly well researched, but ultimately it fails to grasp the interest of the viewer. And perhaps that's because of the stolid, almost bullet point-like way the film tells its story. Don't get me wrong, it is an interesting film. I was very much interested in seeing what events would unfold and what would happen to the characters. But I don't see myself less interested if this was told through a novel or some other medium. It didn't grasp me like it could have. And to be honest, I was a tad bored at times. The Traitor concerns itself with the morality of the Mafia, what it means to be in La Cosa Nostra. The main character's distancing from the life is explored, his reasonings for leaving the Mafia. Interestingly, he notes in his testimonies that he still considers himself a man of honour, as he puts it, and rather it is the people who he sends down who have changed, bastardizing and betraying the morals and the noble values of Cosa Nostra. He talks about how this enterprise, who used to give jobs and protection to the poor, has disintegrated into narcissism and selfishness. That's his viewpoint, and interestingly, this is something that is called out by one of the judges, who dictates that the notion of honour in the Mafia is a myth and a facade, and they have always been a disease that have fed off hard-working people. Through the main character, we see just how tribal the Mafia really is. Its lack of cohesiveness and moral fibre comparable to the judicial system in Italy, with judges and the law easily intimidated by the power of the Mafia and often collaborating with them as a result, showcased best in the film during the trial scenes, which have incredibly poor levels of discipline. So you get a bit of this and a bit of that. It's not something explored too deeply, as the film seems largely concerned with telling the facts. It's pretty much a simple film, an insight into a troubled life of a man who turned his back on the mob. Favino was solid as the main lead of the film, and he carried it well. I like the trial scenes most in the film. They provided a lot of insight into the main character and his decision to expose the inner workings of the mob, and they were the most interesting scenes of the film. I guess my main complaint, if any, was the fact that I did find it hard to follow at times. Maybe it's because I'm not familiar with Italian names, but sometimes I was forgetting who was who, or when exactly the film was taking place and where exactly the characters were, because the movie takes place over numerous decades and the main character is sometimes in North America, sometimes in Brazil, and sometimes in Italy. There's one significant murder scene in the film in which I still don't know who was killed. It's a decent movie, a little too documentary-like, not offering much past the facts, but interesting nonetheless. I give it a 6.5 out of 10.